Welcome to the Stranger Than Fiction podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Patrick Meekin. I'm the author of the True Spiritual Warfare books, Nightmare in Holmes County and 225th Street. Tonight, we have a very special guest, Jennifer Gosney. She's going to share her testimony of spiritual warfare, which it will include a severe haunting she experienced and encountered as a teenager. And we're very privileged to have you on the program tonight, Jennifer. I know some of the details of your story. It is very fascinating, and I thank you again for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So you have definitely had a lot of spiritual warfare and paranormal activity, for sure. Do you want to kind of start, like, where do you feel comfortable starting with your story when you first began having, experiences and whatnot?
My parents, probably starts back when I was around 2. My parents got divorced. My real dad, my mom. Mm-hmm. And she remarried a Christian man. My real dad was very abusive. He was an alcoholic. Okay. Stories that I don't remember him. I don't have any recollection of him really. Mm-hmm. But I do remember stories that my mom's told me all throughout my life that he wasn't a good man. He was an alcoholic. He was very abusive. Mm-hmm. So she left him and she remarried a Christian man. Okay. Probably when I was around 3, she met him and married him. Okay. And it basically kind of goes back to there. I was raised in a Christian home. I'm only child. Raised in a Christian home. We didn't go to church really, but my mom read the Bible to me all the time, and listened to Christian music, and so we were very into God. Just my mom taught me right from wrong. On a daily basis, we talked about things every day. She taught me everything I needed to know when it came to God. Mm-hmm.
And the new stepfather was he was a good role model and everything, and he
was a hard worker, a very hard worker.
Yep. Yeah. So he was kind of the opposite of your. I'm sorry.
I didn't see him much. He worked Monday through Saturday. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, he was gone all the time, but a very good man. Yeah. Very nice and helpful, and helped me being raised knowing a father at least. Yeah. And he adopted me when I was 12.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So that seems like it kind of took a turn for good, that she met him.
For a little bit. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. So he adopted me when I was 12.
Okay.
And
when did you begin to start to have activity, if you want to call it that, like things that you couldn't quite understand or did not seem natural?
Well, one of the first experiences that I really truly remember was when I was 8, and I actually had a really good experience at this point. Okay. I had gotten these glow-in-the-dark ducktail feet. Okay. And I put them across the room on a dresser I had. And they glowed in the dark, and I thought they were so cool until for some reason, the night I went to bed, I looked at them and I was frightened, just immensely frightened. And I went to hide and I started praying. So I hid my head and I started praying to God. And I turned around to look at my door, which was behind me, and there was a hand floating there. And the hand had a hole in it. And that let me know that it was Jesus's hand and that he was guiding me through the night. And I don't know why I was so frightened, but the hand immediately calmed me down. And I knew from that point on, without a doubt, that God was with me. Yeah. And that was the first big spiritual thing that I actually remember, but it was a good thing. Right. At that time, I felt calm and collected and wasn't scared anymore after seeing that. Yeah. So, I knew God was with me.
Yeah, I had some experiences when I was a kid where I was very very terrified, and I was hearing a noise in the room, and it sounded like somebody was rattling paper or something, and I was scared to death. And I started praying, and like under my breath, and it stopped. And I was like, man, I don't know what that was, but that was a good experience. I can relate to what you just shared. It is kind of it's comforting.
Right. It absolutely was comforting.
Mm-hmm. So that's a good experience.
That's a good experience.
Yeah.
And then things, we moved a lot. My parents moved about every 2 years. They were Rolling Stones. My mom, we never owned a home. We always rented, would stay 2 years and then move. My mom was never but we always stayed in the same city. Mm-hmm. We just never stayed in a house for very long. Yeah. And so my mom was just constantly wanting to go. Let's go. Mm-hmm. It's time to move. Let's move into a new home. Mm-hmm. And it was always, there were always like little things that were kind of scary, bumps in the night. Mm-hmm. And we would move on from it. And then we'd move to a new house until finally we moved into a house that was pretty crazy, to say the least. And I was I'm thinking about the timeline of 1993. So I was 13. Okay. And we moved into a home, which seemed really calm at first. Everything was fine. It was cool, calm, and collected. And I started hearing things from some of the kids I went to school with. The boy that lived in the house before me, he was a student in the same grade as me. And we weren't exactly friends, but I knew him. Mm-hmm. And he had told me that he had messed with the Ouija board in the home. Okay. Which at the time I didn't think anything of it. I just thought, okay, that was dumb, but we moved on. He had come back a few times to collect some crystals that he had left. Yeah. And he always just come and grab it. Huh?
So he dabbled a little bit. Crystals and a Ouija board. He was dabbling.
Yeah, he was dabbling. So he came and got his crystals and moved on. And I also went to school with a girl that was a self-proclaimed witch. We weren't really close, but we did have a class together. Mm-hmm. She had told me that she had walked past my house one night, and she said she took a look at the house and threw up. She said something took over her, and she got sick and threw up outside my home. And I just remember being really agitated. Like, why would you tell me this? And you're the self-proclaimed witch, and you're telling me this crazy stuff outside my home. Yeah. So I wasn't actually too happy that she told me that. But at that time, we were just there maybe a month or two. There was really nothing going on other than the fact that I was a young teenage girl. I started to dabble myself into just scary books. And these books were geared towards children. Yeah. Or teenage children, I guess I should say. But I started like getting into them. And I thought that it was simple enough.
Do you remember what book series actually was?
They were called Fear Street. They're R.L. Stein books. Okay. Which, his stuff is geared towards teenagers. And, I thought it was innocent. I really thought that what I was doing was an innocent thing. And so I started reading them, and I got really involved in these books. Okay. And I just, I told my parents, I'm like, it's not a Ouija board like the boy that lived here before. Mm-hmm. It's not crystals or any of the other stuff. It's just books. Mm-hmm. But I got deeply involved, where I had every single one of them. Yeah. And then things just really took a turn after.
Do you think it's possible being in that house kind of caused you to be drawn to those books, or do you think that played a role at all in you being, so interested in those books?
I absolutely do. I think that there was something in the house that was strong. I think that it was grabbing a hold of me. I was also watching, stuff on TV that I probably shouldn't have been watching, stuff that dabbled in the occult, but also, once again, was geared towards children. Yeah. And, I just kept telling myself, well, I'm innocent. I'm the innocent person in this. I'm just reading books and watching TV. How bad could it be?
Yep.
But it pretty much started one of the first nights. My mom saw 2 black shadows walking down the hallway, and she was like, man, I thought your dad was home, because I saw these shadows walking down the hallways and it looked like a man's shadow.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, Dad's not home. He worked every night till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning.
Were they around 7 feet tall by chance, or about the height of a doorway?
They were very tall. Yes.
Yeah. For some reason that there's certain spirits that manifest that way. And it always seems like they're around 7 feet tall, which is generally a doorway height, Yep.
And that's exactly what they were, which was funny because my dad was only like 5'6", 5'7", but just the thought of like a man's figure, I think she was just kind of hoping, that it was him and not shadows.
Yeah. That would be your natural instinct when you see it. And then when it's that's not who it is, that it's kind of scary at that point,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And it got worse from there. The shadows, they started showing up more and more. There was, my answering machine. So my parents always let me sleep in like the biggest room. Since I was an only child, my parents let me have the bigger, better room. The only thing is I had to have the answering machine in there. Back in the 90s, we had those old school answering machines.
Yeah.
So I had to have that in there. And there were just so many times I was sitting in the room throughout the day, and a man's voice, it's the same man's voice, would come on and talk to me through the answering machine. And he would say my name. Yeah. But it wasn't like, hey, this is the so-and-so residence, please leave a message. Like, he would just come on and start talking to me. And it happened probably about 4 or 5 times.
Wow.
But I wasn't really scared. Like, I felt intrigued that I wanted to sit and listen to what he had to say to me.
Yeah. Do you remember,
but
besides calling you by name, do you remember like any of the things that it actually said? Like,
I don't remember anything in particular that it said, and I wish I did.
Okay.
But most of it seemed like he was telling me about my future.
Wow.
But it didn't feel, I knew that it wasn't good. I knew what the man was saying wasn't good, but at the same time, I couldn't help but sit there and, listen to him. Yeah. So, but there was one particular time, usually I just sat and listened, but I guess there was one particular time that my dad was on the phone with his uncle. They owned a company together, and my dad was off work, and he was on the phone with his uncle, and I don't know how it happened, but the phone picked me up, the answering machine, the phone, everything picked me up. And I was actually laughing hysterically at the man talking to me, and my uncle could hear, and he was talking business with my dad, and it caused a huge ordeal.
So you're saying your dad's having a conversation with your uncle. At that same time, the voice starts talking to you through the answering machine, and you are laughing like hysterically at whatever this thing is saying. And now your dad and your uncle can hear your conversation with this other voice, basically. Yeah,
I don't know if my dad could hear it, but I knew my uncle could, and my uncle was getting really fed up. Like, he was really mad at my dad, and he was telling, you better tell her to knock it off. I'm trying to talk to you. And I had no idea what was going on. It wasn't until everything was done that my dad told me, he's like, my uncle could hear you talking and laughing.
But they couldn't hear the other voice, just yours.
They could hear, just me laughing hysterically too. And
I have said this many times, and I had to come to this conclusion on my own when I lived in Holmes County. But demons love to manipulate electronic devices, whether it be TVs, whether it be phones. In your case, an answering machine. That's one of the strangest, most unique demonic manifestations I've ever heard of right there. I mean, I've heard stories of them manipulating phones, all kinds of things like that, even messages on answering or on voicemails, and the messages change. Like I've heard a lot of really messed up stories from people that were having issues, but that talking through the answering machine is that I believe that's unique.
Yeah. Yeah. It's something I haven't even ever heard before in my life.
Yeah. That had to be that like looking back, that's pretty scary.
Yeah. Yeah. Looking back at it now, it is really scary to think about. But back then, for some reason, it did not faze me at all.
Yeah. It's probably the influence of the books, kind of your mind's kind of geared towards the supernatural like that because of them. So it lowered the, you had a higher tolerance for it or something, maybe because of reading those books, perhaps.
Right. Yeah, probably so. That's what I'm thinking. Cause I like to get the scariest of the scary. I mean, I would go to the books and look for just the worst book cover that I could possibly find. I was getting so embedded into these books.
Yeah.
And so when I started looking for them, I was looking for just the worst, the scariest looking, anything that was just going to set me off and be horrible for whatever reason. That's what I chose at this point.
Yeah.
Started off innocent, but then it ended up getting pretty intense. And as it got more intense, the hauntings got more intense.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely very interesting. So what began happening? Like, okay, you're having shadow people in the house. You're having the voice talking to you by name through your answering machine. I mean, that's unbelievable. You know, are you seeing the shadow people more often now too? Your mom saw them, and then are you seeing them too?
I'm seeing them run around everywhere. You know, especially nighttime. It was fine throughout the day. Nighttime would come.
Yeah.
And it was 10 times worse. You would see them, got to the point where you're starting to hear them.
Yeah.
Then they started messing with electronics as well. I guess one particular night, my mom was standing in the doorway and I was laying in bed getting ready to go to sleep. And do you remember the go fishing game where there's a bunch of like colorful fish in this thing and it's got like a magnet and you catch them and whatever, and, you know, it's a really cute game. Well, that started. Something happened and the game started and the fish were coming up and down and it was making the sounds. And then, let's see, the door, I looked at my mom and the door was opening and closing.
Wow.
And everything just started going nuts. And that was the night that I was like, okay, you know, that things are getting way too scary. Yeah. Things are getting way too serious.
So you're both there and the game starts going off. You're both witnessing this. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
simultaneously the game's going off. The door's opening and closing. Mm-hmm. You know, like the air in the room gets strange. Like everything just kind of just goes berserk. And you know that the room is just completely haunted.
Yeah.
Just what did I do?
When you say the air feels strange, is it almost like the air's charged? I've been in locations and where you get that. It almost feels like there's an electricity in the air itself. And there probably is because it's probably EMF spiking and all that. But is that what you mean by that when you're saying the air changed?
Yeah. Okay. Like I could just feel nothing was okay.
Yeah.
At that point, like I opened up some doors. At this point, it was no longer funny. It was actually really scary.
Yeah.
My mom she let me leave the bedroom and go sleep with her. And she called my dad and told him, hey, you know, Jen's going to sleep in the bedroom with me. You sleep in the other room when you get home.
Yeah.
And I thought that would fix things. But actually, as I went into the bedroom with her, things got worse. Like I would look at my mom and her face would distort. And it kept distorting. Like I felt like I couldn't trust her. She was looking at me and my face was distorting. So we were both.
Were they really distorting or were both of yours perception the other one's was?
Yeah, I probably it was more perception than anything.
Yeah. That would be terrifying.
But it was terrifying.
Yeah, that sounds like a horrible, horrible nightmare on you're wide awake. Like that sounds like something you would dream, and it would be like the most horrible nightmare, Only you're awake. That's terrible.
Yeah. And then I did finally fall asleep, and then the wall in her room went up in my dream, or whatever it was, went up in flames, and you could hear screaming in the middle of that.
So you went through the whole horrible situation. You sleep in your mom's room. Before you go to sleep, you both start seeing each other's faces like morphing into something else. Then you finally go to sleep, and when you go to sleep, you have a nightmare that the wall's on fire.
Once again, the wall's on fire. Like there just wasn't any sleep that night.
Yeah, that had to be one horrible night.
Yeah, it really was. And it was constant. And I do believe it was that night that I told my mom, I said, I think that what's going on are these books. Mm-hmm. I had one particular book that had 3 stories in it, and they were the worst of the worst. I called it like the Bible of the scary books.
Yeah.
And when I called my dad after, the door was slamming open and closed and everything, and he said that we needed to get a hold of all the books and we need to tear them up, get rid of them, whatever it is we need to do, they need to be gone.
Yep.
So I did. I found all the books except for the one with the 3 stories in it. I had a bookshelf. I was really neat. I kept all my books on it. I knew it was there, but I could not find it. I pulled all the other ones off. I put them in the trash bag, and I waited for my dad to come home, and I knew he would get rid of them for me and pray over me. But I couldn't find the one, and I had called my dad, and I said, I can't find the one book. And he said, I'll find it when I get home. Mm-hmm. And so he, later on that night, after the dreams and everything, he came home super late, and I woke up with him because I wasn't doing good on sleeping anyway. So I got up with him, and I said, Dad, I cannot find the book. I don't have a clue where it's at. Mm-hmm. And he walks right up to my bookshelf, and he says, in the name of Jesus Christ, Satan, I demand you to let go of the book, and grabs it right off the bookshelf, exactly where I had been looking, and then there it was.
Yeah. Almost like it was supernaturally hid from your eyes. Wow.
Yeah. And I knew, I had recognized what it was. I knew it was, at that point, we were in total spiritual warfare. I knew Satan had his hands on things, and so he did. He got rid of them.
He got rid of them. Did he throw them out or burn them, or what did he do exactly?
He ripped them to pieces. He sat up that whole entire night, ripped them to pieces, and threw them out. But then a couple of days later, all the pieces showed up back in my backyard again. All the pieces of the book. And I have no idea how that happened either. I don't know if it was a big gust of wind, if it was spiritual, but all the pieces, I was out there picking up all the pieces again and getting rid of them again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very strange.
Yeah. It was scary.
Did you continue with activity after even getting rid of the books?
It calmed down for a little bit. Okay. And then it got close to Christmas time. This would have been our second Christmas there. My mom and I said, it's been really quiet with activity. Maybe we just won't celebrate Christmas this year. Maybe this will be a year that we don't celebrate. Mm-hmm. And then we were both like, well, that's no fun. We were very big on Christmas, and we always, baked a cake for Jesus. We tried to keep Jesus as much in Christmas as we possibly could, along with we did Christmas trees and stuff. Mm-hmm. So we did. We put up a Christmas tree, and we decided to go ahead and celebrate Christmas. And then the activity started up again. As soon as the tree went up, as soon as we started, doing festivities, it started up again. The black shadows in the hallway, you name it, it was starting to happen again. The sounds, the things falling off walls.
Yeah.
Just weird dreams. I always had where it felt like my body was held down and I couldn't scream and I couldn't get out of the dreams, and
like you're trapped
just
in
started.
dream.
Trapped in a dream. You can tell that things are around you and they're scary and you want out of it. So one particular night, I'm sitting back in my bedroom. I had an old Super Nintendo. My mom would sit in a chair beside me playing, and I'd sit on the floor beside her, and I would play. And we're just sitting there listening to music, playing Mario Brothers, and things are going pretty good. It was calm. We were having fun. And then I look up, and this is even hard to explain, but there was about the size of a toddler, maybe even a little bit smaller, like a small child, a clear, it looked like it was made out of water, it was fluid, it was liquid, started walking up towards me. And I'm sitting on the floor, and it just started walking towards me. Now, this was probably the worst thing that I probably have ever seen, was this thing walking up to me. And then it said something, but I could not make out even what it said. It sounded like it was coming through a voice box or something. It sounded really weird. I screamed, put out my hands and broke it, and, stood up and freaked out. And I still, to this day, have no clue to what it was. My mom saw it as well. Both screamed.
Did it disappear? Like you actually touched it?
I didn't
feel it
like I
when
went
you did?
through it. Yeah, I just kind of like I went through it. I didn't feel anything.
I got you.
I could barely even see it, honestly. It was like a clear liquid.
Yeah.
But I did. I put my hands out and I like broke through it, and I still, that's probably the worst.
You know what is really interesting about that? I had a guest on a couple of times, Christopher George, and he was he's a retired National Parks Ranger. And one of his stories, they called it the Predator. And if you've ever seen the movie Predator, when that thing would move through the jungle, it could be like it's there, but you can see right through it. It's almost like what you're describing. And in the movie, like this thing would, it would be solid, or it would be like this almost invisible, but it was like when it was moving, you could see that there's a shape there, but you can see right through it. And he saw things like that in the in one of the national parks where he worked. And I always thought that was demonic. Whatever you saw, that was evil, And when you're saying this, now you're in a haunted house, and yes, the description is different because it's smaller, but it sounds very similar. This thing that's like there, but you can see right through it, but it is there like water.
Yeah.
Very similar to what you described. Yeah. Yeah, that would be terrifying.
It absolutely was terrifying. At that point, and talking to people, there was no one to talk to about it, because how do you explain to other 13-year-old kids, oh, by the way, there's a liquid formation in my room? So I felt really alone too. So not only was I terrified, I felt like I didn't really fit in with anyone anymore at this point, because who's going to believe that? But maybe the girl that said she threw up in front of my house, maybe she would believe it, but
she was a witch.
It just, she was a witch. I was absolutely terrified and felt alone. Didn't know who to go to other than God. And at this point in my life, I feel like I don't really think that I ran to God. I don't remember really crying out to God on any of this stuff. Like fear took me over, and all I wanted was for daylight to come. That's the only thing that could save me, I felt like, was daylight coming. It might have been better probably had I called out to God, my mom as well. But we didn't. So it just kept going, especially my dad wasn't around. No, my dad worked a lot. He was hardly ever home.
Was there,
but when he was.
So I was just going to ask you, was there activity when he was there, or was it?
Well, I say no, but there was one particular time, and it was after Christmas, and it was close to graduation. And we were having a barbecue outside, and I remember this clear as day, because nothing ever actually really happened with him other than the laughing on the phone.
Yeah.
And so we were having a barbecue, and my dad was having his mom and his aunt over. And across the street was apartments. And so my mom and I were sitting outside. My dad was lighting up the grill. And an older man from across the street comes over, and he looks at my dad, and he's like, "Oh, I see you're barbecuing." And I was sitting on the ground, like looking through my yearbook. And he said, "I see you're barbecuing. What are you making us?" And so on and so forth, and being silly and talking about, what are we making for him?
Yeah.
But then his attitude changes, and he said, "Well, why don't you have the two boys help you with the barbecue?" And it was just my dad, my mom, and me there at that point.
Yeah.
And he's like, "You should have those two boys help you. Like, really, you got some young, strapping men here.
Yeah.
They need to be helping you." And at the time, I was thinking, who is this guy to be calling me a boy or calling my mom a boy?
Yeah.
Thinking back now, I'm thinking maybe he saw something totally different that I didn't see.
In addition to you and your mom, you probably saw what appeared to be two other young men.
Right. And I just assumed that he's being totally rude, but now, like I said, looking back and all the craziness, I'm thinking he had to have seen something else there. Maybe he saw the shadow people and full on or whatever. But that was an instance that he was home and that happened. And my dad got mad at the guy. Like, he was fuming. He's like, "Get off my property. Go back where you came from. Don't come back."
Yeah.
That was crazy. And
were there other family members that came and experienced anything there or had strange things happen when they were there?
We didn't have many family members come over, but still that particular day, my grandma did come over and her sister came. And I was still sitting down, looking through my yearbook, and I had my aunt come and sit next to me, and I was showing her my friends in the yearbook who I liked, and just all the people. And I noticed like something dropped from her face onto my yearbook, and it was a piece of skin came off of her face and dropped onto my yearbook, and it I don't know, it was really weird. It was bloody, and she grabbed it and pushed it off my yearbook. I was mortified, what in the heck just happened? Like, her skin came off, and
that is,
I don't know.
Yeah. Like a piece of bloody flesh falls down on your yearbook. That is weird.
Right. And yeah.
And that was not surprising. Yeah, it's not surprising, but it's very strange.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of strange ordeals like that, which I don't think I put two and two together for a lot of it. I was young and was just thinking, wow, my family's weird. What's going on? Yeah.
So what did the activity continue after that? Where did it, what began happening after that point? Are you nearing the 2-year point where you think they're going to want to move?
We're nearing the 2-year point. Yeah. At this point, we had enough. We were done. Things. It was still just the constant, hearing banging in the rooms and shadows, and I was really ashamed of the house. I don't know. At 13, I was feeling like I need to clean this house on the inside and outside. And I would just go outside and start scrubbing the home and just feeling disgusted by it. And gosh, if anybody comes by, any crushes or any friends, I wouldn't allow any friends to come by. Just nothing. In fact, I ended up giving up a lot of friends because I became so self-conscious of the home.
Yeah.
And I think I had just one particular friend that I did tell things to. She's the only person I felt comfortable with.
Yeah.
But we were nearing the end. I think my mom saw the social awkwardness that came into me. she wasn't getting any sleep. We were not getting any sleep. I mean, no nights were we laying down and comfortably going to sleep.
Yeah.
Constantly praying for daylight to come and just worried about what the next evening was going to bring. And so finally, we found somewhere else to move, and she put in the month notice.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was having really bad dreams where, right after my mom put in the notice, I was having bad dreams where I could see like a guy banging on the door really hard. And it's almost like a cartoon where you could see the door banging in and out. The guy was banging so hard.
Yeah.
And he was like, let me in, let me in. And so in my dream, I called 911, and the operator comes on and says, 911, how can I help you? And I say, can you please come to my house and get this guy? And then, oh, honey, this isn't 911. I'm fooling you. And it was the guy on the other side of the door. And this stuff was just happening constantly. These bad dreams, feeling like I'm being held down. Shadows never ended.
Did you ever experience like sleep paralysis or anything like in that house where you're like, I'm not sleeping. I know I'm not sleeping and I can't move. And I feel like there's something in the room with me, or I see something in the room with me. Were there ever instances where that happened and you were awake?
Yes, it started there, and then that's something that's probably stuck with me on and off my whole life ever since that home. I mean, I still have those kind of sleep paralysis, or I am asleep, but I'm also very aware that I'm asleep, and I'm still kind of awake, and I need somebody to pull me out of it. And so it started in that home. When sleep paralysis actually started. Yeah. And I'm still, I had one the other day, so it's never ended for me.
Yeah. That is not a fun thing. I had that like one time, and it was the environment where I was at that caused it, but it's a horrible, when I had it happen, I was at a friend's house, and they had this huge ranch house, and his brother was away at college, and he's like, hey, you don't have to drive home. You can stay here tonight. Go down and sleep in my brother's room. So this massive ranch house. So because it's ranch, I'm on the whole opposite side of the house from everybody. And I had horrible nightmares, and I woke up and I could not move. Well, the crazy part, that was horrible. I can still remember the dream I had too, which was super creepy. But I go to work on Monday, and one of the guys I worked with was like, he's like sitting there at lunch, like something's bothering him, and he's like, man, did you ever have one of those deals where like you're awake, but you wake up, or you're awake and you're laying in bed and you can't move? And I'm like, shut up. Why are you talking about that? He was like, I just had it the other night. And I'm like, so did I. It was really strange, and it's not a pleasant experience at all.
No, it's not. It's not pleasant at all. And it makes you feel like you're not going to get out of it, for one. I mean, you can almost feel, like I can always feel the presence, like this doom enters the room, and it comes around me like so dark. Like it's really, really dark, and I feel like I'm absolutely doomed, and I'm just never going to get out of this situation. And and I need someone to pull me awake. My husband actually knows when it's happening, because I'm able to make a little bit of a sound, and he can actually pull me out of it now. But boy, when I was younger and there was no one around to pull me out, that was hard. I'd have to like move a leg or something, to get going and get out of it.
Does he ever feel anything when you're experiencing that? Does he ever feel like there's anything,
I think there have been times.
Yeah, that would be that. I mean, to me, that gives proof to the thing that it is spiritual and it is real. It's not just like some people, oh no, when you have that, you're just between being awake and being asleep and blah, blah, blah. No, that is not what it is. And the other thing that's funny is the people that have it, they feel that a lot of them see it, but they always know. It's like there's an awareness that there's something evil in the room with them. And some people see it.
You can see it, you can feel it. Like it's almost as even you can smell it. Like all your senses are awake. It's there, and there's no denying it. there's no deep REM sleep or whatever they try to sell you. It's something not good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely not a nice thing to go through, and you're vulnerable because you're sleeping.
Mm-hmm. I mean, absolutely.
That's the thing, and that's why they're attacking then, is because obviously you're most vulnerable. You're laying down, you're asleep, and then you come out of being asleep to that, So you began having the sleep paralysis in the house then as well.
Yeah, I began having sleep paralysis. I'm not sleeping. I'm not doing good in school. Like, everything is just going south for me. And I don't know anybody else going through this stuff. Even as an adult today, I look at friends from Facebook and think, man, they had such a nice life. They didn't have to deal with any of this stuff. But, I guess what doesn't kill you.
Yeah, I get it. I think back sometimes now of different kids I knew when I was in school, and we were a lot younger, and it's like you see life differently, and you think, man, they were going through something, And when you're a kid, you don't think about it or whatever, but man, when you get older, you're like, man, now I understand why they acted the way they did, and it's sad.
Yeah,
it is sad because you don't know. Yeah, and honestly, with a haunting situation, I mean, for me personally, I got to where I didn't care if people thought I was crazy. Like, I would talk about it to people that I knew well, and I didn't care because it was something I dealt with day in and day out, Yeah, there were periods where, some time goes by and nothing happens, and then boom, when you're least expecting it, something happens again,
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, that's horrible. So, you're having the sleep paralysis. You have this weird incident where a piece of your aunt's face falls off into the yearbook. So the neighbor guy's talking about two boys that aren't even there. That he says there's two boys there. Nobody else knows anything about that.
Right. Yeah. And even my mom, like, she was so offended because she was like, what was the guy even talking about? What did that mean? And it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
We're not boys, though. We don't look like boys.
Yeah. I'm sure he probably did see it,
Yeah. I think now, as an adult, looking back and knowing it was spiritual warfare, I think now he had a glimpse of really what was going on in the house. He saw men, boys, whatever it was, whatever those black shadows were, he was seeing them in the flesh or whatever.
With all the manifestations you were dealing with, it would not surprise me if he really saw them as people standing there, honestly.
Right.
That would not even surprise me,
Right. Yeah, me neither. Not at this point, especially when you've got teenagers saying, that they felt something outside your home.
Yeah.
But my mom was done. I was done.
Yeah.
We were ready to go. So we went on the search for another for rent home in the same city, but away from that house. And of course we found something. But of course, when the time came to move, my dad helped us get the heavy stuff out. We went back to the house to clean up, and we had actually taken a Cocker Spaniel, our little dog that we had, back to the new house. And so my mom and I went back to the house one last time, and we didn't want to, but my mom always wanted her deposit back.
Yeah.
So she's like, we got to go back. We got to clean up and, things right again.
Yeah. So you took your new dog to the new house. So he's not there now.
Yeah. Our dog's not there.
That is good.
We took her.
I always worry about animals in those situations.
Yeah. There were times she didn't even want to go into the house. She would stay running around for hours. We couldn't get her to go inside.
Yeah.
And I know that she saw something. There's no doubt in my mind. So we decided we weren't going to take her back. We're going to take her to the new home.
Yep.
So we went back to the house and we started cleaning. And, we had this game plan. She was going to clean a room. I was going to clean a room. We were going to get things done, and we were getting out. We had hoped to get done before nighttime.
Yeah.
which unfortunately didn't happen. My mom was a clean freak. She wanted everything perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time we were done, it was probably, it was nighttime. It was probably like 9, 10 o'clock at night.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to leave. And I thought, okay, this is it. We're getting out of here.
Yeah.
Hasta la vista. I don't ever want to see this house again. And we go out the back door, which is where the car was parked, to the driveway. And there's these 2 big black dogs. They look like Doberman Pinschers.
Mm-hmm.
But the only thing I can explain them is like demon dogs, because they look like Doberman Pinschers, but they didn't.
Yeah.
They're hard to explain. There's just these 2 big black dogs. And my mom and I were like, oh, crap. What do we do with this?
Yeah.
So we leave. We go to the front door. We're like, well, if we go out the front door, we can figure out a way to weasel our way around and get to the car.
Mm-hmm.
We go to the front door. There's the 2 black dogs standing at the front door. Okay, well, now they're there. We'll go back to the back door. We'll just jump in the car. Back to the back door, and there they are, both of them again. So we're starting to realize we're not messing with typical dogs. We're messing with more spiritual warfare.
Yeah.
Mom said, let you go to the front door, I'll go to the back door, and we'll see where the dogs are, and we'll go out whichever door they're not at.
Yeah.
Of course, I go to the front, she goes to the back, and one is at each door. So I told her, I said, we're not getting out of this house. We're stuck. Like, we're stuck here forever.
Yeah.
We waited around a while, went to look. The dogs were sitting on her car, just daring you to come out. They're showing their teeth. I mean, these dogs were ugly. I'm an animal lover, but these dogs were absolutely ugly.
And you've never seen them in this neighborhood before?
Never seen them in my life. Never. Finally, we started praying, which is, once again, what we should have done in the first place, but we didn't. So we start praying, and next thing we know, the dogs are in the backyard. So they're still there, and they're still letting us know that they're there, but they're letting us leave at this point. Yeah. We hopped in the car, and we took off. I looked behind us. They were chasing us down the road. Eventually, we lost them.
Yeah.
We got to our new home, and we were fine.
Yeah.
But it was years later. I kind of forgot about the dogs. Every once in a while, my mom and I would talk about them. But once again, at the time, I didn't think much of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was years later when I had moved to Illinois. I went out to dinner with a friend of mine we worked together, but she went to college.
Mm-hmm.
And the girl that she was dormed with she told me was a proclaimed Satanist.
Mm-hmm.
And we were sitting there talking about what that looked like. Yeah. We were both Christians, born again Christians at this point. And we were talking about what that looked like, this Christian rooming with a Satanist.
Yeah.
And, we talked about it, but she said something that was so wild to me. And it made my skin crawl. She said, whenever you're in a Satanist home, and this is what her Satanist roommate told her, whenever you're in a Satanist home and you're trying to leave that home, she said, 2 demon dogs will show up.
Wow.
And that just blew my mind. I was like, man, I mean, I was like, well, that makes sense, because a lot of Satan worship went on in that home before we moved in. And then I guess the books and everything that I had done had carried it on.
Yeah.
And that was just proof, that, and they didn't want us to leave.
Yeah.
They did not want us to leave.
That had to be the most surreal feeling when she tells you that, after not knowing that you had experienced something like that. I mean, and that does confirm that, yes, somebody had done more than just dabbling really in that house. And it makes me think that definitely played a role in you wanting to read those books, Yeah. Because you will be influenced by what's there. You don't even know it's happening, but they do influence you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I notice, like, even today, if I watch scary movies, I've always liked, scary movies. I've always liked scary stuff. But I notice even today, if I watch something that's scary, it messes with me differently now.
Yeah.
Like I don't have the haunting so much, but it still messes with me in one way or another. I feel guilty or, it's still spiritual, very much so.
Yes. And it is weird. You get to a different place after going through that where you're, I don't want to say numb to it or immune to it, but some of the things I've experienced, I don't even understand if I'm telling somebody about it that I'm scaring them to death and now they're not going to be able to sleep. Like, I don't think like that anymore because you're in a different place and you get it. Also, from the Christian perspective, when you really understand spiritual warfare, there's a whole different, it's completely different then too, because you know how to beat it. You can beat it. So it is even different then, but you do still have to be careful, It's funny, the movie Demon House that Zach Bagans made, it's a documentary, and I watched that and I fell asleep watching it, and I had the most creepy, I can't remember what the nightmare was, but I had a horrible nightmare, and I was watching it because to me, he really was, I don't care for his language, but he was at least confirming, this stuff really does happen. And these houses really are haunted. If anybody that, watching knows the story there with that house, a family went through a horrible haunting and it made national news. So he bought the house and then he went in there and stayed in there and had horrible things happen to him, but it's like, you do have to be careful, definitely. Even when you understand it, when you understand your authority, you still have to be careful.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to be careful. And man, because once it starts happening to you and you know that you can get into that spiritual warfare, you can't dabble. You can't mess with it. I mean, I noticed that even, like I said, I can't watch scary movies, reading scary books. Like I can't do it because I still have issues with it.
Yeah. Experiencing it at that age had to be tough too.
It was very lonely. Because like you said, there's no one to talk to.
Right.
Other than maybe a friend. But then at that time, you don't even know if they're going off telling people that you're crazy.
You're right. Seriously. Yeah. At that age. Yeah. It's even worse at that age, honestly.
Yeah, 13. My son is 12, and I know every little thing he does, it can make him or break him. Yeah. So at 13, same thing. I got to watch what I say.
Yeah, you don't want to be the kid at school everybody thinks is crazy. But at the same time, you're dealing with it every day. And, this sounds funny, but it's almost like the old movie, A Nightmare on Elm Street, but it's, you really are experiencing horrible stuff every night, and it really is affecting you in real life. You can't sleep, and then you got to go to school like that, and you can't sleep, so you're tired and you're stressed out, and you can't relate to what other people's lives are like because you're going through so much. It is absolutely horrible.
Exactly. It's lonely. It's horrible. You just you just want to get away. There's got to be somewhere better than this. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Did you feel like anything followed you after that, or did you feel like when you got out of there, and of course, I think you said you became born again. That's helpful, But did pretty much the majority of those things you were experiencing stop once you got out of the house?
The majority of it did. I still had, certain things happen. There was always something going on in my life. The next house we moved into, I would always see a white cat in my window when I would come home from wherever we were coming home from. There was this real pretty white cat sitting in my window. And I would see it every day, but when I would be outside, it wasn't there, but I would see it when I was driving up. And then one particular night I was laying in bed, I was listening to Carmen, the old Christian singer Carmen. He passed away a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
I was listening to him, which is something that I grew accustomed to. I'd read my Bible, listen to Carmen. I was trying to, stay on the narrow line so that none of the stuff would happen again. But one particular night, I heard a girl outside my window crying and just boo-hooing it. And I paused everything and I listened, and I could just hear her crying. And she sobbed for hours, it seemed. Mm-hmm. But then after that, I never saw the white cat again. So I don't know if that was a spiritual thing. I can't imagine that it's not.
Yeah.
I thought it was really weird and kind of significant with what I had just gone through at the house before.
Yeah.
But it was, I just knew. I'm like, just please don't let this be something, that's coming back at me like it was before. Please let this be something that's just insignificant in that it's not going to happen again. But
right.
I mean, I still had some nightmares.
Mm-hmm.
I've always, just had spiritual warfare.
Yeah.
From the moment, I think really from when my parents divorced up until today, still yet. So
yeah,
spiritual warfare is just
yeah, you kind of go through where you're in a fight or flight mode all the time. And when you're in that environment, especially because you never know what's going to happen next.
Right.
But you are sensitive when you get into a normal house, you're still sensitive because of what you've experienced, Oh,
absolutely. Absolutely. You still look around, and we've lived in this house a little over a year, that the house we live in now. And I'm still, checking out every corner and every sound I hear, and just still worried. I still have that childhood fear that something's going to pop out at me, or something's going to pop on, or, just any of the stuff. And like I said, in the past year or so, I mean, I've even had the dreams, where it feels like something's in the room, and I still, as an adult, I still have, and it seems to show up now whenever we're involved in a church. So since we've gotten involved in a church now, it seems like that's when it's the hardest, whenever it's showing up the most, when it's when the dreams come, or when I feel like I'm fighting a demon in my sleep. That seems when it's really, taking off and happening. So,
But they're probably going to fight you in a way that you've already experienced because it was traumatic. So they're probably going to fight you and attack you in those same ways because they know that's going to get to you,
Right.
So it would make sense. And I will tell you, when I write, I have activity when I write my books. I have activity when I'm writing them. A lot of times when I do other people's podcasts and interviews on their shows about my books, they have stuff happen. Sometimes I do as well, but they'll have things happen. And the devil is not happy when you're doing anything for God. He's not happy about it, Yes. And he'll definitely mess with you. And again, he's going to hit you where it hurts,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Go after your marriage, go after your children, go after your church. He's after all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, it's good that you guys were there 2 years roughly, right, in that house. It's good that did not destroy your mom and your stepdad's marriage, because in those environments, people get turned against each other pretty bad, So the fact they survived, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think it was a strong faith in God that he had.
Yeah.
And probably maybe the fact that he was never home either. But
he may have been preoccupied with the work, and that actually kept him from some of it, They do sometimes, they will affect women differently. And they'll prey on women sometimes more than they do guys. It just depends on the situation. But I know I think it was even Ed Warren talked about that, And I think in those days, now granted, in the days that Ed Warren was, doing his thing, that was more a time period where the women were not out in the workforce as much and they were at home a lot alone. So if they're there alone, they're going to get messed with more because they're in the house more often. So that probably played a role in all of that as well.
Right. Yeah. I think so too.
Yeah. So your friend tells you, confirms basically that, yeah, you guys were dealing with demons, even trying to get out of the house, that were trying to keep you there. Where did your life go after that? After you had experienced those things and that kind of came out on the other end, became a Christian, is there any other significant twists and turns or anything in the story after that point?
Well, I became a Christian, and like I said, listening to praise music and we still were never really truly churchgoers, but we all believed in God. We talked about God. We read the Bible together. One thing that really wasn't instilled in me was being equally yoked with people, with a partner.
Right.
So as I grew up, I graduated high school, I had met a guy who was not a Christian. And he was a lot like how my mom explained my first dad, or my real dad, I guess I should say. He was abusive. It wasn't, a couple of months into the relationship when he started verbally abusing me and saying just really horrible things. And, by this point, I really loved the guy, or I felt I did. I was really invested. I did not care that he wasn't a Christian. I felt like change him. We moved around together. We had moved from Oklahoma, where I was raised, to Colorado because he was always in trouble. There was always cops after him. He was always in trouble.
Yeah.
So he would burn his bridges in Colorado when I was doing good, and we'd have to move to Washington State and Utah.
Yeah.
It was when we had moved to Utah, he started using really bad. And I guess one really significant night, I didn't realize how traumatized I was, I guess. And one significant night, he abused me, to the point where my face and my neck were black and blue. I was swollen. And I was working at a gas station there in Utah, and I was put my hair in my face so nobody could see my face and ask me questions.
Yeah.
But I had got to work the next day after the trauma, and I was covering up my face, and all of a sudden a memory came back. And in the memory, I was 3.
Okay.
And I remember when my mom left my real dad and she had met my stepdad, her and my stepdad took off and they went to Texas together, where she had left me with my grandpa. And my grandma had just passed the previous year. So she had left me, just me and my grandpa, in the home together. And I know I was 3. I remember all of a sudden, I just automatically remember that I was 3, and the timeline fits too, because I've asked my mom, how old was I when you left with my stepdad?
Yeah.
And she was like, you're 3. And I knew that had happened because I remember running next door to my aunt's house, and she would find me hiding in the cupboards, and she'd be like, oh, Bootsy, what are you doing here? My family's Croatian, so they always called me Bootsy. So she would find me hiding somewhere in her home. And I remember doing this a lot, but thinking back, I didn't realize why I was hiding in her cupboards. And, she would find me and she'd be like, oh, Bootsy, what are you doing here? You need to go back home with Grandpa. And she would send me on my way. But I remember being scared.
Yeah.
So this memory came back to me, and my dad had come into the house, and this was a memory I obviously blocked out, but it came rushing back after the trauma of what the guy had done to me the night before.
Yeah.
So my dad had come into the house, and we were off on some side room, and he had brought a woman with him, woman with long blonde hair, and she was sitting looked like a couch, and she had a table in front of her, and she was snorting something, which I am assuming was cocaine.
Yeah.
And I was watching her because she was laughing hysterically. She kept laughing. And at the age that I was thinking that maybe she was just friendly, and she's laughing because she's nice. And, I'm naive. I don't know any better.
Yeah.
So maybe she wants to be my friend.
Mm-hmm.
But I look over at my dad, and at this point, my dad is bottomless. He doesn't have pants on. He doesn't have underwear on. And I just remember being face to face with his male genitalia and not knowing what to do with it. Like, confused. Like, why? Yeah. What is this? It's. Yeah. I shouldn't be looking at this. Like, it shouldn't be in my face. And I remember him walking at me and saying, "Go ahead, you can touch me if you want to. Go ahead. You can touch it." And I remember that as clear as day. But then as he comes at me, the memory goes away. And I don't remember anything that happened afterwards. It's completely gone.
That was a repressed memory. So when your mom met your stepdad, they moved away for a while, and you were with your grandpa. They left. And then you didn't really remember much about being with your grandpa, but you would remember you would go to your aunt's next door and hide, and when you were scared, but you don't really know why or any of that. Yeah. And then after you have this traumatic injury later, where this boyfriend at the time beats you up, and it releases a repressed memory of definitely a very questionable situation for a little child to have been put in. That's terrible, Right. And so now this memory's there. It's very strange. And it seems like there may have been more to the story that you had, your mind had blocked out.
Right. And I can't, for the life of me, I can't remember what happened afterwards. I don't know if he raped me or. Right.
Well, at that situation, that alone right there is so bad. Just the part that you do remember is that's super messed up. I mean, that is no normal guy would do that to a little kid. I'm just going to say that. No, that's so abnormal. And you're supposed to be protecting children. And your own child. Why would you not protect your own child? Right. So that's a horrible. And were there? So you have this memory comes back. Were there things about that memory that you were able to confirm? Okay, this isn't something crazy. This really is a memory because for instance, that lady was real. That really was a real person that I don't have any other memory of. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, is there something like that can be confirmed?
Well, when the memory came back, and I mean, it was just such punched me in the gut. Like, oh man, my dad really was a terrible person, because I always tried to, assume that he wasn't, that he really loved me. Yeah. And my mom's just crazy telling me all this stuff. But when the memory came back that day, actually, I called my mom and I asked her, I said, was there a long blonde-haired woman that hung around my real dad? And she said, oh yeah, that's Martha. And they were married. He ended up marrying her after we divorced. Yeah. Which, I don't remember her in the past, but
other than that one little memory that came back. Yeah. Wow.
And then I did, I remembered my mom talking about her and about him remarrying her. When she brought that up, I was like, okay. I said, so what about her? And she said, well, she was a drug addict, and she got your dad bad in drugs. Yeah. He was already an alcoholic, but now he was into cocaine when he died and everything else. So, yeah.
Wow.
So it was confirmed.
Yeah. Do you think there were other reasons why that played a role in why you were going to your aunt's and hiding then? That maybe that was the reason you were running off to her house and hiding.
I think so. Looking back now, and after listening to podcasts about things and rituals and stuff, I can't help but wonder now, as an adult and knowing what more that I know, if there was like a ritual that was done or something that caused everything to follow me around. Like I used to think all the crazy things that happened to me as a kid, my dad killing himself, this haunted house, like the dreams, constantly hearing and seeing things was just individual ordeals, just had bad luck. But now looking back and listening to different podcasts and actually listening to other people that have gone through things that are similar to what I've gone through, I think now, trying to put the pieces together, I think now that it all stems from one big event that happened at that point when I was 3 with my dad. I feel like it stirred up something even back then. But it's still trying to figure out what it was, what happened. Do I even want to know what happened?
I think God allowed you, and it's weird that it came through something terrible that happened with being beat up, but that does affect your mind sometimes, and you will, after some kind of head trauma, you'll start remembering repressed memories. So I think he allowed you to remember as much as what you could handle. That obviously, I mean, there's got to be more to the story. And you mentioned that he did kill himself later on.
He did kill himself less than 10 years later after that.
Okay.
He put a gun to his head in his parents' bedroom and killed himself.
Yeah.
Which was kind of funny too, because even as young as I was and hearing about that, most children would have remorse, but it was almost like I didn't care.
Yeah.
It did not affect me in the least bit, which I think people thought it was crazy. People around me were like, your dad, basically blew his brains out. And I was like, yeah. But then it was not.
Your subconscious knew more, but it was hiding that from you.
But it was a couple of years after that the haunted house happened too. So, which was also I felt was kind of significant.
Yeah. I think like what you went through, that would have opened doors, even though you're an innocent victim. And because of what he did that, I mean, let's say the situation ended right there with where your memory stops. That's already over the top traumatic. Okay. That in and of itself is still, let's be honest, it's a sexual assault because, nobody should be exposing themselves to children. So let's just say that it stopped there. If it did, that's still going to be traumatic. It's still going to bring open doors where stuff's going to start messing with you. So then even though your mind's blocking stuff out though, so you're not remembering it, but the devil still knows it happened to you, and then you end up in a house where something really bad happened. Somebody else dabbled in the occult and Satanism and open doors. You're like a sitting duck in that environment. Anybody would be, but you have those areas that you're not aware of from the trauma that, that makes it even more difficult, I
remember reading Gregory Reed's Nobody's Angel book. And I remember one of the things that kind of resonated with me was in the beginning, he talks about how he doesn't, from his trauma, from his childhood and all the stuff that he went through. I remember him saying that he only had bits and pieces of a memory.
Yeah.
And the trauma was so bad that he had to piece his life together through the book that he was writing. And that really resonated with me because it took trauma to release trauma that was hidden deep down inside of me that I didn't even know that I hid.
Yes.
But like I said, it only goes so far. Like I don't know how to unhide the rest of it, or if I even want to, or
generally that is the thing. Like when someone who's been through something like that, when they do tell it, generally it's not generally like, oh, so here's what happened, here's the timeline. It's not, because their mind is processing things in bits and pieces. So when they share it, it's not because they're not telling the truth. They're completely telling the truth, but they're sharing it in the way their mind's presenting it to them, so to speak. And it's in bits and pieces. Every one of the bits and pieces is true, but it's how their mind's handling what they went through, And it's, like experts that help people work through those things, they understand that, but it's terrible. And let's be really honest, he probably had something messed up happen. Dabbling in drugs can make people do some pretty messed up things. But it's generally the way those things work. There's stuff that goes back multiple generations back. That continues and victimizes more people in the family.
Like a generational curse.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
And they'll keep playing out till somebody puts a stop to it. It can be broke and stopped and broken over that person and all future generations. But a lot of times that's the thing that's weird. Like when you do deliverance ministry, sometimes you're dealing with a demon and you're like, when did you come in? How did you get in? And it'll be so many, like 6 generations back or 8 generations back or more. And it's like, this person wouldn't even have probably never even heard of that person, But that's the thing. That's how the devil works, though. He'll just keep it, keep it going quietly, And, I've known people that, like take a person that there's people I know that got adopted into a Christian family, and the family was really nice. Took them to church every Sunday, treated them wonderfully, gave them the best home life they could ever ask for. And then later, they're struggling with things, and they're like, "Where did this come from? I wasn't raised like this. Where's this coming from?" And then they find out, their biological parents and their biological grandparents and all that all dealt with those exact same things. And even though they never knew that person, they're still dealing with that because of a generational curse.
Right.
It's funny. I like with a lot of people that I've done deliverance with, and I think you could probably ask any deliverance minister this same thing, and they're going to say the same thing I'm about to say here. And that is probably the number one way that something gets in is, obviously trauma is terrible, but usually there's a generational curse already in play. And that's what causes people to have to go through a lot of these things into demonization. And the good thing is, like you're saying, you're still having you've had some dreams that were really scary recently. And that again, it's still, though, you've handled things really well, all things considered. You know what I mean? You've really handled things well. And the other thing, you're trying to serve God. You're trying to do things for God. And I'm sure that is making the devil mad, because not only is it, he doesn't want anybody serving God. So that's how it is anyway. But he's like, you were supposed to be destroyed a long time ago. Why? And now I got to deal with you like this. You were supposed to be dead a long time ago. And God protected you. And now I got to deal with you because now you're ministering to others.
Yeah.
He doesn't like that. And that's how it plays out. When you submit to God, that's how it plays out. He uses all those terrible things so you can minister to other people and help other people. And you can empathize with people. You can talk to somebody and you really truly feel their pain. You know what they're going through because you've been there, And somebody that hasn't, but maybe has the textbook knowledge, they're still not going to be able to relate to somebody who's really hurting a lot of times because they can't relate to them because they haven't been through it,
Right. Absolutely. It's been hard to find people, that can relate to it, and I was lucky. I was so lucky, 15 years ago, God introduced me to my husband because he could relate. He did, understand what I was saying. I didn't sound crazy. And, just there was no one to really talk to before because people will be like, oh, you sound like you're on drugs. Maybe you were on drugs when that happened. I'm like, no, I wasn't on drugs. Like, this really happened. But nobody wants to listen. Nobody wants to know that this stuff goes on.
Absolutely, it does. And that is awesome. And then the two of you together, you're serving God together, And so, again, Satan hates that very badly, But again, see how God knows the beginning from the end. He does, and he will use, all the things the devil means to destroy us, God will use for our good. It's not fun going through things sometimes, though. We have a terrible enemy, and his goal is to steal, kill, and destroy. And a lot of us, we've almost been destroyed. We've almost been killed, and we've definitely had everything stolen from us. Our joy, all kinds of things that we didn't deserve to go through. But so since you mentioned your husband, I understand he started a effects pedal company. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, I don't know much about guitars and pedals, but he's got a really cool pedal that him and a buddy have put together. It's really awesome. It sounds really good. We've had some good feedback on it. It lights up, which is really cool. He's got the little halo, or I guess I'm not really allowed to say halo, but a light at the bottom of it.
That's cool.
It's pretty cool. People say it sounds good, and so
I've seen demos and it sounds incredible. So that's awesome too. What is the name of his company making the pedal?
Rorschach Devices.
Rorschach Devices. Okay, I'm going to put some information on this video about that as well. I think that's awesome. I think every guitar player out there needs one for their pedal board. And I believe it's a very sophisticated delay pedal. Am I right? It's a very sophisticated delay pedal. Sounds incredible. I've seen demos and I'm like, that's impressive. Very impressive. So
he's got a commercial out there.
What's that?
He's got a commercial out there too that he did that was really cool. With the guitarist from El Monstero, which is a Pink Floyd cover band from St. Louis.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's really, Pink Floyd definitely used some delay, so that would be fitting well with that music too.
Absolutely.
Cool. I will include all that too. I think that's awesome. But is there anything else you would like to share before we start wrapping things up here? Your story is fascinating. Again, I thank you for sharing it. I mean, you're a gutsy individual. I mean, those things are not easy to talk about. The trauma is not easy to talk about. But you know what? There's other people who have been through some really bad things too. And that's going to minister to those people as well. Because you know what? They went through some bad things. And the paranormal, people can't really understand what that's really like without going through it. And you always run that risk of being called crazy or whatever. But it's not crazy. It's real. The Bible's full of stories of let's call it the supernatural. But a lot of that is what is it? It's spiritual attacks and God protecting people. We have an enemy, and the enemy wants to take us out, and he is a spiritual being, and his whole kingdom is all about destroying mankind because we're made in the image of God. And so what you're saying is not crazy, and it's a perfect example. Bad things happen in homes, but people dabble in the occult and Satanism. Doors get opened. Somebody else moves in later. That's still there. There was still a door opened in that house. So it's real life. And, I'm glad you came through it okay, but you're definitely gutsy to be able to talk about those things.
Yes, thank you. It's really hard to talk about. It's taken years to really talk about it. It's taken years to piece a lot of it together because, like I said, it just felt like, gosh, I'm one unlucky individual, but that's not the case at all. I think that I'm actually lucky, even though the situations were not fun to go through. I know that there's a God, and I know that He loves me. I know He loves my family. And I know that He absolutely is there for us. And He was there even when all the stuff was going on. He was there through the haunted house, through the hauntings. He was there even through the time when my ex and I, when he was abusing me. He never leaves your side. And I'm so absolutely grateful for that. It has helped me to see that the spiritual warfare has kept me on my toes. It's kept me realizing God is real. It's kept me, it's making me want to dig in deeper and help people out with it and, let people know He's real. And no matter what Satan brings and no matter what demons do to you, God is stronger and God is better and He's there. That's right.
And sometimes that's a test of our faith, but that's one of the biggest weapons we have is our faith. When you're binding demons and get out of my life, leave me alone, stop attacking me in my sleep, and you're taking authority over them. That's one of the biggest ways you can exercise your faith, because you're standing on the word of God right there, and you're taking all that authority that Jesus gave us as believers, and you're telling the enemy how it's going to be. And that you have that authority because your faith, So that's one thing Satan hates is when a believer has faith and understands warfare. Being in a war is not fun. It's not easy, but you know what? The final, what we get in the end, it's going to be well worth it.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, absolutely. I want to thank you. I'm sorry.
I said I 100% agree with
you. Yes, I want to thank you again for coming on the program tonight. Again, that's a very fascinating story, and again, I hope it ministers to some people that are listening. It's fascinating, but it's powerful, and it shows the power of God even in the face of severe demonic oppression. So to the listeners, I want to thank you for tuning in tonight. Again, I'm your host, Patrick Meekin. I'm the author of Nightmare in Holmes County and 225th Street, which are both available at Amazon.com.
Great book.
And I also, again, want to encourage you. I'm going to put up an ad for Jennifer's husband's effects pedal. It's an awesome delay pedal. So anybody playing guitar out there, or if you know somebody who does, you can get that as a gift for them for their pedal board. A lot of people play worship music in church. It's perfect pedal for that as well. So thank you for tuning in. Yes. And until next week, good night and God bless.